Ask yourself this question: what is it like to go to sleep and never wake up again? It's baffling to imagine, and most of us picture eternal nothingness. But you can take this question a step deeper. What is it like to wake up after never having gone to sleep? This, of course, refers to birth. Did you feel any inconvenience before you were born? Why should death be any different? When you ask these questions, you will notice that birth, death, and rebirth are all aspects of the same cycle. Stepping into the unknown is a certainty we all have to face. However, whether you step into it full of fear or with a heart full of courage and curiosity entirely depends on you. Thankfully, the wise words of Alan Watts can give us some insight and comfort into the final stages of this realm and what may come after we shuffle out of these physical forms. So, dear truth seekers, stick with us to take a journey through the afterlife with Alan Watts as our guide. Number 6. Reincarnation. The first insight into death we are going to look at today is the idea of reincarnation. In the traditional sense, you may imagine your entire soul and identity being reincarnated into a new form, with no memory of your past lives. Watts looked at this a bit differently. In his words, after you are dead, the only thing that can happen is the same sort of experience as when you are born. After people die, other people are born, and they're all you. Only you can experience it one at a time. Instead of viewing reincarnation as the succession of an individual soul, he saw it as the rising and falling of one grand consciousness. We are all interconnected in this cosmic tapestry, and each new life is like the rising and falling of a wave. Imagine we are all one God, just experiencing life in different forms. Wouldn't it be boring to experience the same thing over and over again? Reincarnation can be interpreted as the continuous manifestation of the universe in different forms. Next time you have a conversation with someone, try to picture it as the same being experiencing two sides of a discussion, instead of just you talking to someone else. You will start to open yourself up to the idea that each and every person holds the essence of a higher power. Number 5. Death is not the opposite of life, but an essential part of the life cycle. We cling to life and fear death, but Watts proposed that these are not separate events. They are interconnected and interdependent aspects of the same cycle. Consider the cycle of seasons. Spring brings new life. Summer allows for growth. Fall marks the transition to decay, and winter represents death or dormancy. Each season is essential for the cycle to continue, and the same can be said for life and death. The same can also be said for order and chaos. We shun chaos, but it is a necessary part of life that eventually brings order. There are certain plants like eucalyptus and banksia that require fire for their seed pods to open up. Without forest fires, these plants would not be able to continue their natural cycle of life. Can you see how death is a necessary process that allows for renewal, change, and ultimately the continuation of life? Without death, there would be no space for new life to emerge, and the cycle would become stagnant. In this sense, death is not something to be feared or viewed as the enemy of life, but rather an integral part of the natural order. Number 4. Death must be embraced. When we say death must be embraced, this doesn't mean we should seek it or hasten the process. Rather, we must accept its inevitability and integrate this awareness into our lives in a way that enhances our appreciation for the present moment. As Alan Watts put it, once you're gone, you can't come back. You never get the chance to tell the living all about your experience with death. You don't get a do-over either. Instead of fearing death, we must accept it. If you are prepared for death in every moment, you will truly live it. We seem to picture death as some far-off eventuality, but those who have experienced the death of someone close will know it can come at any moment and with very little warning. This should not give us anxiety for life, but rather a knowing that each moment is precious and we must cherish the short time we have here on earth. If you or someone you know is going through the process of death, learning to embrace it will allow you to step into the next phase without regret about your life and a sense of wonder at the natural process of life. Number 3. The fear of death is rooted in our attachment to the ego and our resistance to change. Alan Watts said that the idea of death is only fearful to the ego, to the separate skin-encapsulated center of consciousness. Our ego represents the part of us that separates itself from the rest of this cosmic creation. It is our sense of self, identity, and ultimately our attachment to the physical existence. It is the part that wants to maintain control, cling to the familiar, and avoid the unknown. You can see how this side of ourselves will fear the greatest unknown there is, that of death. When faced with this massive change of states, the ego will want to cling to life as hard as it can. But as Alan Watts teaches, the harder you try to hold on to something, the more you will feel it slipping away. Clinging to life will only bring more fear of the inevitable change we all have to face. When faced with the prospect of death, our ego becomes threatened by the potential loss of control and the dissolution of our identity. This attachment to the ego and the desire for permanence can lead to a deep-rooted fear of death that takes away from what it should be, a celebration of life that was lived, and a transmutation of energy into a different state. Death represents the ultimate change, one that is beyond our control. Try to approach it with a sense of curiosity and excitement, like leaping off a cliff into a huge body of water. Number 2, the idea of an eternal afterlife may be a projection of our fear of death and desire for permanence. There is hope inside many of us that there is a beautiful afterlife awaiting us once we are done in this realm. While this sounds like the reality we would all want, Watts challenged this idea, claiming that this is just a projection of our fear of death and a desire to cling to our egoic attachments in this life. Watts said that the desire for a future life is the desire for a continued ego, and the idea that the ego is going to have a future is what keeps us from realizing that our present state of consciousness is the afterlife. The idea of a wonderful afterlife will only create an expectation for the future, an expectation that will rob us of the beauty of the present moment. This idea will prevent us from fully embracing the impermanence and fluidity of life. We cannot seek solace in the future, but we can find it in each waking moment. Similarly, many of us imagine that humans were banished from the Garden of Eden. The truth is, we are still living in the Garden of Eden. It can be found in every piece of nature, in every life form, and in every beautiful experience we share here on Earth. Do you want to live a life where you are constantly waiting for a goal that you are never sure will even materialize? Or do you want to create amazing experiences in each second of the eternal moment of the now? Our ego desires continuation of the identity, but attachment to the ego will only bring suffering. Once you relinquish this attachment, you will see that you can create the extraordinary afterlife you want right here on this plane of existence. Number 1, we die and are reborn in every moment as we are constantly changing and evolving. As everything goes through a birth and death cycle, so too does your consciousness. The idea of a fixed, unchanging self is an illusion. We are continuously evolving and changing in every moment. This constant renewal of ourselves is a mirror of the death and rebirth cycle. Embracing these cycles will allow you to discover the highest version of yourself and let go of old patterns that no longer serve you. Embracing this idea will ultimately help you embrace the final death that we go through. But remember, death is not permanent. What you do in this life ultimately affects the energy you are passing on to the next. As each soul dies, a new one is born, and so the cycle of life can continue without stagnation. As Alan Watts said, death is the only way in which we can be fully alive. What do you think happens after death? The answer to this age-old question has eluded philosophers, holy men, and even scientists since the dawn of consciousness. But let us know what you think in the comments, and be on the lookout for our next Alan Watts video, Don't Let the Devil Know of Your Escape.